He renounced his royal title, traversing scorching deserts, dense forests, and fiery paths on foot, all to test the absolute boundary of his physical endurance. For weeks, he endured starvation, rigorously conditioning both his physical and intellect to endure any hardship, driven by a desire to acquire divine abilities to rescue humanity. This narrative commences a quarter century prior. 25 years ago, the Aryan tribe migrated to the territories adjacent to the Indus River, nestled at the base of the Himalaya. Subsequently conquering the indigenous inhabitants, they established dominance, and over time, their governance fostered the emergence of numerous regional kingdoms. One of the most formidable being Kosala. Kosala consistently exerted pressure on the night-warring Shakya kingdom, deploying its military to subjugate it at every available chance. Each conflict inevitably resulted in significant loss of life. These skirmishes devastated their territories, reducing them to rubble, and led to the enslavement of many. A pervasive sense of suffering afflicted the populace, who endured wretched existences, yearning for a savior. Concurrently, within a monastic sanctuary nestled high in the Himalayas, the venerable monk Asita detected a potent spiritual emanation originating from the southern region, and instructed his pupil, Narada, to investigate. Asita tasked Narada with descending the paths and journeying south to locate an extraordinary individual destined to become the Chakravartin king in the coming year. Several years subsequent, King Suddhodana, sovereign of the Shakya realm, embarked on one of his customary hunting excursions into the wilderness, where he encountered an astonishing phenomenon. All the forest creatures congregated around him, exhibiting unusual tranquility and quietude. Abruptly, a messenger appeared, informing the king that the queen requested his immediate presence. They swiftly returned to the royal residency, where his consort, Queen Maya, recounted a vision she experienced. A magnificent six-tusked elephant entering her being. Upon hearing this, Suddhodana expressed his delight, sharing his own miraculous encounter and declaring his conviction that a life across the land had bestowed its blessing upon them. He turned his steward towards the river, noting that despite the customary drought conditions at this season, there were no indications of such scarcity this year. Suddhodana attributed this auspicious sickness to the shield soon to be born to them. Meanwhile, beyond the castle walls, a contingent of Shakya soldiers was observed. This group navigated the impoverished thoroughfares of their native land, escorting several captives. Their procession drew the attention of a young enslaved boy. The boy, named Chapra, attempted to get a better view but inadvertently collided with some local ruffian, who quickly spotted the precious contents of his basket. The ruffians demanded they surrender the item if they wished to be released. Chapra immediately fled, compelling the two goods to pursue him through the bustling thoroughfares. He continued through the congested street until he darted into a convenient alleyway. Just as he paused to recover his breath, a small boy named Tata unexpectedly leaped over him, seizing the fabric he carried. Subsequently, when Chapra recounted the incident to his master, the unfortunate boy retrieved a severe lashing. Upon learning of this, his mother rushed in, pleading with the owner to inflict the punishment upon her instead. The owner declined, stating that the woman was their property, but extended a small measure of clemency by granting the boy a 3-day reprieve. He was given 3 days to retrieve the stolen fabric, with a stern warning that failure would result in his mother being sold. Chapra found the prospect of losing her unbearable. As he traversed the bustling marketplace, he spotted the identical fabric for sale in a stall and attempted to reclaim it with theft and escape. Regrettably, his attempt was unsuccessful. He was swiftly apprehended and severely beaten. Afterward, he stumbled down a flight of stairs, silently falling to employ a means necessary to prevent the slave trader from selling his mother. At that very moment, Tata, the young thief from before, emerged atop hour with his companion. Allowing at Chapra, Chapra insisted they return the stolen textiles. However, the boy merely intensified his slaughter and instructed his friend to assault Chapra. Chapra managed to fail a few, but their numerical superiority quickly overpowered him. He brutally beat him, laying battered and depleted on the ground. He implored the boy to return the fabrics, attempting to convey their repercussions. Shortly thereafter, Chapra awoke in a dilapidated shanty to find Tata present. Wilson summoned his sister to attend to Chapra's injuries. She appeared and administered a pungent concoction to Chapra, a medicine they had prepared by boiling any available roots. Following this, Tata formally introduced himself. Tata confessed that he had already sold the fabric he had pilfered. Chapra instantly cried out in indignation. But Tata's sister shortly informed him that their survival depended on pilfering from others. She taunted him, suggesting he must have been lost in Togut in the alley while his possessions were being stolen. Chapra then began to explain his predicament. He revealed that this was called Mela, but would never see his mother again. Eliciting their sympathy, Tata subsequently volunteered to assist him in rescuing his mother later that day. The slave merchants began leading the woman, including Chapra as mother, away for sale. At that precise moment, a tiger emerged from the dense jungle, instantly dispatching both brothers. The big cat then focused on Chapra as mother, but before it could strike, Chapra charged forward, clutching stones. Yet, before he could hurl them, an unusual event occurred. The tiger retreated into the undergrowth, where Tata's spirit departed the animal and re-entered his own form. Encircled by various creatures, the young boy stood, a smile gracing his face. By chance, a passing monarch, Narada, witnessed this spectacle and pondered if this shield was the prophesied basic individual his master, Asita, had spoken of. However, their moment of potential celebration was cut short. The Kosalan army once more arrived to assault Kapilavastu, the capital of the Shakya kingdom. Tata clarified to Chapra that the kingdom of Kosal sought to annex their territory. Realizing the army would traverse his village, and fearing for his family, he panicked and sprinted away, desperate to reach in before the soldiers. The general leading Kosala's forces appeared to be a brutal and unfailing individual, who reveled in bloodshed, cycling maniacally. As the Kosalan army advanced through the village, the young boy frantically searched for his mother and sister, only to discover them deceased, overcome by profound sorrow. The boy found vengeance, and Chapra pledged his unwavering support. Later that evening, as the Kosalan army established camp to commemorate their victory. Before their onward march to the capital, Chapra and Tata covertly observed them from afar, vexed by the yelling of approaching the general. Tata then softly confided his strategy to Chapra. Tata projected his spirit into a horse within the Kosalan ranks, using it to instigate the pandemonium. Chapra capitalized on the ensuing chaos, leaping onto the possessed state. He rode towards the general, drew and launched several arrows at him. However, the general averted his head at the final instant. Thus, the general narrowly avoided certain death. Moments later, Chapra and the horse found themselves encircled by spearmen, but before they could attack, a sudden plague of locusts descended upon the encampment, plunging the army into disarray. Seizing this opportune moment, Tata and Chapra pursued the general towards a nearby river. There, the general tumbled into the water, his fortune reversing as ravenous crocodiles began to encircle him while the flames above the surface. Chapra swiftly prepared to end him with an arrow. His intent was to avenge Tata's kin. Buddha paused, questioning if we should to remain enslaved indefinitely. The general, in a state of panic and desperation, cried out. He offered his entire fortune in return for his life. Disregarding Tata's furious objections, Chapra systematically eliminated the crocodiles, then plunged into the water and brought the general to safety. Turning to Tata, he offered an apology, clarifying That this individual represented a crucial stepping stone to ascending within Kosala's hierarchy, deeming it an unparalleled chance. Chapra then unveiled his strategy to acquire influence within the army. Asserting that this divinely bestowed opportunity was the sole path for slaves like themselves to transcend their arduous existence. Despite his reservation, Taylor agrees. The following day, a soldier urgently informs King Suddhodana that the Kosala forces have secretly departed. They abandoned the Rohini River during the night, having lost much of their provisions to Alokis Bagu, and General Buddha is now unaccounted for. A wave of relief was shed over King Suddhodana, who smiles as the Shakya troops erupt in cheers. Afterward, the king approaches his wife, Maya, assuring her it is safe to journey back to her native land. For childbirth, concurrently, Tata and Chapra reach the Kosala military encampment. Chapra expresses gratitude to Tata for acceding to his self-serving plan, then requests that he return, and convey to his mother that he will eventually come for her. As Tata leaves, Chapra transports General Bude into the camp, where Kosala soldiers immediately converge on them, shouting for medical assistance. Getsan collapses, feigning extreme fatigue as if he had single-handedly carried the general the entire distance, allowing the situation to unfold exactly as she had orchestrated. Upon regaining awareness, the general requests to sum the boy, inquiring how he might compensate him. Chapra simply advises him to get ample rest. The general then proposes to adopt him and integrate him into his retinue. Chapra readily agrees without a moment as to wait. The narrative then transitions back to the Shakya kingdom, where Queen Maya is being accompanied to her native land. Her escorts establish a temporary encampment close to the Rohini River, as crossing it is necessary for their journey. Each soldier receives strict orders to safeguard the queen irrespective of the cost. At daybreak, with the ascent of the sun, Creatures congregate beneath a tree, signifying the birth of the royal heir. The queen whispers to her infant that the entire world bestows its benediction upon him. However, her health quickly deteriorated. The escorts hasten her and the newborn back to the royal palace, where King Suddhodana rushes to greet him. Maya requests that the king behold the infant, and implores him to bestow the name Siddhartha upon the boy. The king smiles, remarking on the name as strength, and disclosing its significance as he who has achieved his objectives. With her vitality ebbing, Maya cradles the infant and gently strokes his face before she breathes her last, entrusting him to his father as guardianship. A brief period thereafter, the revered Sacha Asita arrives to behold the child. The instant his gaze falls upon the infant, the monk is overcome with profound wonder, observing that the baby, with one finger directed seaward and another towards the earth, signifies his unparalleled status in both terrestrial and celestial realms. He foretells that the boy is destined to mature into a universal monarch, a Chakravarti. To be that future juncture, he himself will no longer be living to witness this event. A decade elapses, and we observe a troop of indigenous dancers. Attempting to amuse Siddhartha, Buddha grows weary and departs his chambers. Concurrently, two members of the royal staff, Love Wizir and Agatano, arrive seeking him. As his father desires an audience with him, the boy emerges from behind a tree, reiterating his inquiry about the societal structure. The two individuals reiterate the instruction, clarifying that the uppermost social stratum is designated as Brahmins, encompassing ascetics who offer prayers for abundance. The prince, nevertheless, finds this notion absurd, that a kingdom's prosperity could solely stem from the supplications of monks. He endeavors to convince him that both he and his royal father are obligated to adhere to the Brahmin's authority, subsequently stating that the Kshatriyas follow a class comprising formidable warriors and aristocrats, such as himself. They then elaborated that beneath the nobility reside the common populace and trader, collectively identified as the Vaishyas, and occupying the lowest rung are the Sudras, encompassing enslaved individuals and manual workers. Sudatta challenges this absurdity, questioning the rationale behind placing Slavat at the lowest position. However, the two swiftly lead him to the king, who is sat on his throne. A warrior named Bandaka is receiving accolades for his accomplishments in Magadha, and the monarch exhorts him to persist in his efforts for the nation as well far as he bestows upon him the title of the new general. Upon Siddhartha as Arifang, his father presents the prince to the newly appointed general, declaring Bandaka to be an expert archer. Throughout the past decade, Kosala has maintained absolute dominance, vanquishing adversarial neighboring status through conclusive triumphs. Now as the military return from its most recent victory, soldiers and populace alike acclaim Chepra's name, honoring him with reverence. It is common knowledge that General Bodi has adopted him as his son, and this news has disseminated throughout the military echelons. That Chepra is now the designated successor to the general as heritage, as he rides amidst the throne. Chepra grins, reflecting on the considerable ascent he has achieved. Meanwhile, back in Shakya, a monastic instructor is educating the Kshatriya offspring, impressing upon them the necessity of developing into formidable combatants capable of vanquishing the Kosala military. Among these children, Siddhartha stands up and inquires about the fate of the deceased following their funeral return. However, the instructor becomes annoyed and instructs him to be seated and cease squandering time. The prince's companions contend with him, but the elder as lesson are tedious, and they persuade him to miss the instruction. The small contingent stealthily enters the woodland, where Siddhartha confesses that he has never previously ventured beyond the palace grounds. At that precise moment, the two friends espy a rabbit and pursue it. But as one of them prepares to shoot an arrow, Siddhartha punches on him, enabling the rabbit to flee. The two youngsters resume their chase after the animal, while the prince remains behind, appearing despondent due to his aversion to any harm befalling a living creature. Drifting by himself, he soon becomes disoriented and discovers himself in a luminous glade where a dark complexioned ascetic is performing on a musical instrument. And Siddhartha takes a stand before the individual, pondering if this entire experience is merely a dream. Concurrently, Jataka becomes entrapped in treacherous, sinking mood and calls out for assistance. Sudatta and the other youth attempt to extricate him demands of a tree, but the boy can only grasp a fragile branch, which immediately breaks upon his grip, causing him to sink further until his life ebbs away. Overwhelmed by sorrow, the prince rushes to his stepmother, who embraces him, relieved by his safety. However, when he exclaims that Jataka has perished, he becomes unwell from profound melancholy. She implores him to rest, then proceeds to the king, attributing blame to herself for the misfortune. Yet, the king reassures her that the boy as delicate nature originates from his biological mother, Maya, and assures her that she has provided excellent care for him. He then proclaims that, noting the boy has attained the age of 10, it is time to commence his martial arts instruction. The following day, as Siddhartha sits calmly, engaging with a butterfly, an arrow abruptly strikes and kills the insect. This event both startles and enrages the prince, as his father's general, Bandaka, materialized, closely trailed by the king, Walton informs the young boy that this individual will serve as his martial arts instructor starting from this day forward. Siddhartha directs Bandaka not to treat him leniently simply because of his royal status, and the general readily assents. Subsequently, when Bandaka escorts Siddhartha for archery practice and showcases his proficiency with several flawless shots, but upon the prince being invited to attempt, he can scarcely manage to shoot, grappling with the bow. During a separate training exercise, soldiers observe that General Bandaka is exerting the young prince to his absolute boundaries, despite him being merely 10 years of age, continuously assailing him to compel self-defense. As the instruction progresses, the general escorts Siddhartha for equestrian training and commences hunting animals purely for entertainment, which incites the boy to request his cessation. Bandaka retorts by admonishing him to cease exhibiting weakness. He then pursues Adair, with the prince trailing behind, imploring him to spare the animal. When Bandaka attempts to execute a precious shot, Siddhartha intentionally fires his own arrow to disrupt him, thereby enabling the deer to flee. Bandaka subsequently informs the boy that a nation as monarchs must possess strength and has no requirement for compassion, prior to concluding the day as training. In this manner, half a decade elapsed, and in the vibrant metropolis of Savate, situated within the Kosala kingdom, the throng roars at his approval as Chapra stands in the gladiatorial arena, engaging a formidable adversary. His every action is exact and resolute, capturing the notice of a high-born woman, who cannot conceal her admiration as she effortlessly vanquishes his opponent. He triumphs in one competition after another, and also at moments she appears the momentum to shift. Her apprehension, instead of deterring him, invigorates him, leading him to triumph once more. That same day, General Budai encounters Shepard and extends his felicitation. He informs Chopper that a single victory in the upcoming final match will secure him both the King's Trophy and the esteemed title of Hero of the People. Chopper confidently nods, certain of his impending success, and pledges to uphold his honor. Just then, the distinguished lady from before approaches and presents him with a blossom. Her steward conveys her fervent hopes and well wishes for his triumph. After her departure, the general discloses her identity as Lady Malika. The vizier is Daugeta. Chopra clutches the flower. Chopra experiences a premonition of success. The subsequent day, Lord Chopra steps into the stadium amidst roaring acclamation, confronting his ultimate adversary. This opponent is Lord Bindika, the firstborn of a prominent lineage. Upon the host as signal, both combatants rush forward, their swords meeting with acclaim. Chopra appears to be distinctly outmatched, due to his smaller stature, as all of his blows are repaired by Bindika, who ultimately dislodges him from his mount. Nevertheless, Chopra refuses to yield, attempting to leap at his foe, but Bindika deftly maneuvers his horse and kicks him back to the earth. Subsequently, Bindika advances, his sword aimed at the young man, but Chopra evades the strike at the final second with a high jump, seizing the saddle. He then positions himself behind Bindika, and drags him from the horse by his throat, and both combatants tumble to the ground. Witnessing this, Malika flees, tears streaming down her face, while the spectators implore the fighters to rest. Chopra regains his footing and attempts a leaping strike, but Bindika repels him with his powerful limb. He then attempts to crush Chopra by leaping onto him, but Chopra narrowly avoids it by rolling to the side. Bindika then resets and succeeds in rendering Chopra unconscious, with a blow to the face, subsequently lifting him by his head and mercilessly striking him repeatedly. Following this, he raises his fist in triumph. Then, Chopra struggles back to his feet, declaring that the fight is far from concluded. Observing this, Bindika seizes his sword and attempts to strike him down. However, Chopra evades the attack and snatches some stones, which he hurls to dislodge the sword from Bindika's grasp. Immediately afterward, he swiftly retrieves his own blade and aims it at Bindika's countenance, before rendering him unconscious by striking him with the sword as well, shattering some of his teeth. With this decisive action, he proclaims his triumph and secures the esteemed title of Hero of the People. In addition to the King's Trophy, later that day, Lady Malika personally attends to Chopra's wound, while he requests her gentle touch, as she admits the torment she felt watching the entire contest. Concurrently, the vizier shares Adrien with General Budai and conveys his aspiration for Chopra to wed his daughter. General Budai readily agrees to the proposition, deeming it a significant honor for both their families. However, the vizier then poses a disquieting inquiry, questioning whether Chopra is indeed the offspring of his late elder sister, which takes the general by surprise, instilling in him a fear that the truth might be exposed. Yen, he recollects the evening, when a boy of humble Chester rescued his lamb. He secretly summons Chapralat at night, cautioning him that should his Sudra heritage ever be revealed, it would spell disaster for them both, imploring him to guard the secret, at any priest, before leaving him with his grave admonition. Meanwhile, returning to the kingdom of Shakya, Siddhartha has matured into an impressive young prince. He captivates General Bandaka during training, and the Shakya soldiers observe with awe his rapid development. King Suddhodana experiences pride witnessing his son as formidable growth. Despite him being only 15, and the general likewise commends Siddhartha's advancement. Later that evening, the prince discreetly departs, as was his custom, with royal guards in pursuit to retrieve him. However, Siddhartha effortlessly outruns him and makes his escape, galloping his horse rapidly through the urban landscape. He encounters a sorrowful couple lamenting the demise of their offspring, Suan. Additional men emerge, identifying themselves as outcasts afflicted by illness. They implore Siddhartha for financial aid. Without a moment's delay, Siddhartha sheds his silken garment and precious adornments, casting them aside as the impoverished residents of the slums scramble to collect them. At that precise moment, several local ruffians appear, intent on confiscating the valuables, shoving the ailing outcasts away and asserting that, those on the verge of death they have no need for such riches, as they pilfer everything for themselves. Having plundered the outcast, the dukes then fixed their avaricious gaze upon Siddhartha. Yet, before they can lay a hand on the boy, a woman appears on the scene and orders them to desist. The dukes address her as their sister and voice their grievances. As she cautions them that if any harm befalls the boy, they will avenge decapitation. Despite their bewilderment, the ruffians grudgingly comply with her directives and retreat. Once they depart, the woman too proceeds in the opposite direction, advising him to go back, as he is being shocked by money. However, Siddhartha attempts to detain her. She pauses, introduces herself as Miguela, and counsels the prince against bestowing his possession upon the outcasts. She explains that these individuals are all half dead, forsaken by their kin, and merely await the arrival of death to claim them. She informs him that he cannot comprehend existence beyond the palace wall. This statement incenses Siddhartha, who retorts by asking if she possesses knowledge of a world he is unfamiliar with. The following day, Miguela guides the prince through the town, where Siddhartha is distressed by the meager sustenance of the populace. Miguela tries to hasten him along, but the prince repeatedly hats upon encountering individuals in their straits. Miguela inquires why the prince is so captivated by his society, but before he can respond, the prince observes a slave being severely punished for attempting to pilfer after it. Unfeigned, the prince weeps as he comprehends the hardships endured by his papa, but Miguela clarifies that mortality is a universal fact, and that all individuals are human, irrespective of their caste or standing. Later that day, the prince found himself unable to concentrate on his training and departed prematurely. He remarks on the beauty of the day and reads to meet Miguela. They toured the town, observing the surroundings from above. Miguela questions Siddhartha if their current companionship is appropriate, given that she would ordinarily be forbidden from conversing with him. Upon hearing this, the prince recalls her own words about their shared humanity. Reacting to this, Miguela playfully shoves him into the water, inviting him to swim alongside her. Meanwhile, General Bandaka observes the entire scene with a malevolent grin. Subsequently, the prince is summoned for an audience with the king and receives a reprimand when the monarch inquires if he had been consorting with a person of low birth. The prince is appalled to hear Suddhodana refer to Miguela as a lowly commoner and vociferously protests, but the king retorts with equal vehemence, declaring that he represents the kingdom as future and is obligated to fortify the nation. The king then departs, prohibiting the prince from exiting the castle. As General Bandaka secretly listens and smiles contentedly. Later that evening, as Miguela is appreciating the river splendor, the general appears and orders his men to apprehend her, and has her bound to a cross for execution. While she cries out Siddhartha's name, he struggles desperately to break free from the guard, aiming to reach his father and halt the impending execution. Siddhartha manages to escape and confronts his father, demanding an explanation for Miguela's arrest. The king states, who is occupied with a meeting, but the prince merely yells at him to release her immediately. Instantly, the king inquires if he refers to the female brigand, and Siddhartha unequivocally declares that he will never pardon him. Shall they proceed with her execution? As the king remains unyielding, the prince unsheathes his sword before all present, questioning the king if he considers being in love such a dishonorable act. The king averts his gaze, reminding the young prince of his royal obligations to the nation. But the prince persistently pleads for Miguela's life. Witnessing his son's profound animosity towards him, King Suddhodana adjusts to Siddhartha's plan to free the alleged bandit, on the stipulation that he weds Princess Yasodhara from the adjacent kingdom. Despite his initial revulsion, the prince, swayed by the crowd as clamor for Miguela's execution, reluctantly consents to the proposition. General Bandaka, imploding a searing bloody, slashes both of her eyes, when Siddhartha exclaimed, demanding an explanation. Bandaka states he deprived her of sight. He did this to prevent her from ever slaying him again. Miguela reassures the prince, urging him not to fret, and as she is led off, she cries out to Siddhartha that his image is yarred into her man for eternity. She then expresses her joy at their encounter and the brief time they shared, imploring him to awaken as a magnificent monarch. She is then escorted away, leaving the prince in tears. Not long after, Prince Siddhartha weds Princess Yasodhara, and while all others appear joyful, the prince remains somber. King Suddhodana informs his son that, upon his birth, the revered monk Asita foretold his destiny as a mighty Chakravartin king. Concurrently, the youthful Tata, still seemingly agile, arrives in the Kosala kingdom alongside Chapra Asmodean and the monk Naradatta. Tata insists that Chapra must be in the vicinity. As these entire surroundings, the throng erupts with cries of the general's approach. Tata clambers onto someone's shoulders, realizing that the individual being celebrated as the general is none other than Chapra. Chapra Asmodar is overcome with sorrow and wistfulness, while Tata, thrilled, requests a visit to the general's residence. Chapra Asmodar, however, states that merely saying her son sufficient. Subsequently, Chapra implores the Kosala leaders, advocating for an assault on the Shakya kingdom. Once more, to seize their fertile territory, the proposal receives unanimous approval, and preparations commence, while a courier delivers tidings of war to Shakya. King Suddhodana informs Siddhartha that their nation is diminutive, and their prolonged evasion of conflict was miraculous, but no war seems inescapable. When Siddhartha expresses reluctance, stating his aversion to bloodshed, his father raises his voice, attempting to impress upon him that capitulation would mean their realm would be overwhelmed by Kosal. However, when the prince remains unconvinced, the king departs, declaring that such an demeanor would prevent him from ever ruling. At a later point, the Kosala army confronts the Shakya forces close to a frontier settlement. Chapra spearheads the assault, and Prince Siddhartha is utterly weary of the conflict. General Bandaka approaches him, suggesting he remain behind and observe his troops perish from his vantage point. Precisely then, one of his soldiers presents him with a container of lethal poison. Bandaka imbues his arrows with it, declaring that no warrior struck by the same closer, precisely than envious of the general finds amusement in the spectacle of human demise. The general, with a maniacal, bloodthirsty grin, affirms this. As the general departs to alter the course of the battle, Nyae taunts the prince, asserting that a craven individual like him would never comprehend. While the conflict intensifies, Chapra unleashes a furious assault, concurrently with Prince Siddhartha's entry onto the battlefield. Both General Bandaka and Chapra fell a considerable number of combatants, whereas Prince Siddhartha gallops about, imploring everyone to cease fighting. At that very moment, several enemy soldiers notice him, and upon learning of the prince's proximity, Chapra swiftly charges towards him. Concurrently, Siddhartha finds himself encircled by hostile troops. While his own men perish defending him, General Bandaka observes Chapra advancing towards the prince and gives chase. He attempts to strike Chapra with a shot, but misses. He acknowledges the prowess of the Kosalan hero, concluding that conventional strategies would be insufficient to outwit him, and conceives a sinister stratagem. He seizes a fallen enemy, positioning it before him as he gallops past Chapra, feigning camaraderie. Once he has bypassed him, Bandaka pivots his stick to face Chapra, and discharges a venomous arrow at him. However, instead of collapsing, Chapra extracts the projectile and retaliates, dismounting Bandaka from his horse. Following Tia, he makes directly for Siddhartha, while Bandaka ponders the ineffectiveness of his poison. Chapra hurtles towards Siddhartha at maximum velocity, but at the final instant, Siddhartha gazes at him with compassionate eye, enveloped in a regal aura. Subsequently, Bandaka's poison takes hold, causing Chapra to misdirect his assault. As he tumbles from his mount, he reflects on the celestial presence he perceived and how Siddhartha's gaze penetrated his very being, prompting him to question if death was imminent. Still burdened by his regrets, and witnessing Chapra collapse to the earth, convulsing from the toxin, Bandaka vociferously proclaims himself the vanquisher of the opposing general. Before commanding his forces to decimate the foe, with that, both armies withdraw, leaving behind only devastation and anguish. Back at Budai's residence in Kosala, the priest declares that the poison has permeated Chapra's system, rendering him beyond salvation. Just then, Malika and her father appear, inquiring about Chapra's condition. Then Budai responded that his survival until the next day would be nothing short of a miracle. Upon hearing this, Asquiril, inhabited Bitata, dashes towards the impoverished estate. Duei enters his own form and informs his mother that Chapra is beyond saving, prompting her to panic and attempt to rush out to him before time runs out. However, Naradatta intervenes, suggesting his master-made possess a remedy. Given Tata's ability to flee to the Himalayas overnight using his abilities, Naradatta volunteers to convey the message. Naradatta composes a letter and extends his good wishes to Tata. By inhabiting numerous creatures, Tata traverses vast distances, ascends into the heavens, and ultimately arrives at the monastic temple. Those were all present are astonished as he descends from the sky and lands before Master Asita, bearing the letter. The venerable monk is taken aback upon reading its content and proceeds to the periphery of the outdoor hill, and transmits a spiritual message directly to Naradatta using his abilities. He reprimands him for squandering the lives of so many creatures merely to rescue a single boy. Yet Naradatta remains resolute, asserting his unwavering commitment to saving Chapra. Upon hearing this, Master Asita cautions him that he will be transformed into a wild beast for the remainder of his existence. That as retribution, and reveals the remedy to him. Naradatta rapidly realized the antidote as formula to Chapra's mother before succumbing to madness. When flees into the wild like a canine, she weeps at the sight but finds solace in the knowledge of Chapra's impending survival. Subsequently, at Budai's abode, Chapra's mother implores Budai to administer the cure to Chapra. He consents, and immediately after its application, the physician is astonished to witness Chapra's eyes flutter open. Concurrently, Siddhartha exposed inquiry if he is awake due to some distress, to which he confided his profound unease. At the daily spectacle of illness and mortality, while he remains inactive, he contemplated whether any action on his part could alleviate the suffering, or if he should simply disregard it entirely. He says, lamenting that his privileged upbringing as a prince had blinded him to the pervasive suffering of existence, even as the Shudras possess a deeper understanding of the world than he does. He declares his resolve to uncover the fundamental truths of existence, then reassures her not to be concerned and to rest. Returning to Buddha's estate, Chapra's mother is confined to the cella, while Buddha informs Chapra that Lady Malika had come to visit him. Subsequently, when he is alone with Chapra, he instructs the boy to adhere to the narrative that he is Lord Buddha's offspring and to expel all recollections of his humble, present existence. Upon hearing this, Chapra grows worried, questioning the timing of such a reminder. But when he overhears Buddha instructing his staff not to speak of the woman who delivered the antidote, he discerns that something is amiss. In the cellar, two individuals prepare to execute Chapra's mother, but Chapra leaps down, filling the larger man, before commanding the slender man to refrain from touching his mother. Hearing this, the men are astonished that Lord Chapra refers to a commoner as his parent. Before the others could prevail on him, Chapra swiftly drew his blood and silenced them. Afterward, his mother embraced him, remarking on how much he had matured. Their tender reunion was interrupted when Chapra spotted the corpulent man attempting to flee. He tried to give chase but was unable to prevent the escape as his old wounds opened. His mother was forced to carry him up the steps. Upon reaching the summit, they were encouraged by Buddha's guard, who charged Chapra with cancelling his Sudha heritage. Buddha, in his dismay, branded him a fool. The following day, in the courtroom, the magistrate inquired of Buddha whether he was genuinely unaware of Chapra's Sudra background at the time of his adoption. The general, without a moment's hesitation, offered a false testimony, igniting a commotion. Subsequently, the guards forcibly broke Chapra's mother forward and cast her to the ground. Before the presiding judge, who questioned her true maternity, she vehemently refuted the assertion. Even as Chapra struggled furiously against the guards, she declared that she had discovered the boy on a battlefield, asserting he was therefore not the offspring of a Shudra like herself. The judge probed if she was being untruthful, but Chapra's mother reiterated that he was not her progeny. This revelation shattered the boy's heart. At that instant, Chapra told her there was no longer a need for her to fabricate the truth. Expressing his relief, he no longer had to endure the apprehension of his true identity being revealed. The judge then inquired if she had just confessed to being a Shudra, which he confirmed with pride. He then embraced his mother tightly. The judge was astonished that the young man so readily discarded his noble standing, stating he ought to feel disgrace for his lineage. However, Chapra retorted that he had only assumed a noble identity to avoid being scorned and mistreated in public. Following this, the judge declared that General Buddha would be confined to house arrest. Meanwhile, Chapra was to be banished from Kosala, prompting his mother to offer a gentle smile and a farewell. Again, the judge then condemned his mother to death, intending it as a deterrent, which incited Chapra into an uncontrollable fury. He cried out that the decision was unjust, asserting her complete innocence, even dropping to his case to plead for her to be exiled alongside him instead. His mother embraced him, reassuring him that everything would be fine, but he wept, declaring that a life as a commoner had no value without her, imploring the judge to execute him as well. The following day, a considerable throng assembled to witness Chapra and his mother traversed the city. Tata observed the unfolding event and began to trail climb up the mountain side. Reaching the summit, the captain vociferously proclaimed that unclean Shudras merited punishment for merely bragging. then commanded his soldier to hurl them from the precipice. Suddenly, Tata cried out, diverting their attention and urging the mother and son to flee. Nevertheless, a soldier instantly launched a spear, piercing both of them. After exchanging one last meal, he plunged to tear the maze deep within the valley. Even in his drunk state, Naradatta grieved the loss of the mother and son. He was transformed into a mindless creature. Meanwhile, Tathagata fled in tears. Concurrently, in the kingdom of Shakya, Siddhartha as wife delivered their child. Joy filled everyone at the arrival of the new prince. Simultaneously, Siddhartha emerged from the palace, now appearing as a weary, overburdened father. He pondered that despite his continuous daily learning, he felt no closer to the truth he sought. He felt bewildered, understanding that all beings were destined to experience suffering, regardless of circumstance. He grappled with discovering a method to aid others. Thus he now saw it apathy to embrace this reality without succumbing to despair. Later, while meditating beneath the expansive canopy of a colossal tree, he ultimately resolved to relinquish all attachments in pursuit of his enlightenment. On evening, Siddhartha observed his father sleeping soundly and silently apologized for betraying his trust by departing. With time, he rode into the wilderness. After a while, however, one of his attendants pursued him, imploring him to return. Siddhartha instructed the man to compose himself. He then told him to lead the horse back to the palace. Next, the man observed in astonishment as the prince divested himself of his opulent garment and precious jewels. He instructed the servant to deliver all these items to the queen. The man nervously inquired about his immediate intentions, and Siddhartha left him utterly dumbfounded by seizing a blade and completely shaving his head, until his head was as smooth as a polished stone. He then handed the shorn head to the monk, instructing him to present it to his wife with the promise of his eventual return. He would return once he had discovered the truth he sought. Back at the royal residence, the queen clutched his possessions, tears streaming down her face, while the princess wept, holding his shorn head. Just then, a herald arrived, proclaiming that the kingdom of Kosala was launching an assault. At that precise moment, the king summoned Bandaka and ordered him to assume command. However, Bandaka betrayed him, stating he would only comply if he were declared the next monarch. The king then attempted to admonish him, but Bandaka aimed his sword at the king, unequivocally stating he would and his life if his demand was not met, thereby compelling the king to appoint him as the next ruler of Shakya. On the field of battle, Kosala's formidable army pressed forward, while Bandaka, now crowned king, commanded the Shakya forces. Under the new king's direction, archers unleashed a volley of arrows upon their adversaries, felling infantrymen, while Bandaka himself charged in, striking down foes indiscriminately. Then, the Kosalan soldiers advanced with their war elephante, compelling him to fall back. Yet, Bandaka cleaved through their incoming arrows, even deflecting some baji, before leaping over the elephante on horseback and swiftly dispatching them. He then boasted to his adversaries, ridiculing their weakness, before cutting down another soldier and lodging. He believed that from that moment forward, we would do well to remember the name of their new sovereign. Just then, as we were saying, Vesper, Fasalgiri and Taslim calculation, yang tak company. Sometime afterward, Siddhartha traversed the vast bed of corpses, feeling profound sorrow for the tragic destiny of and tenderly closed Bandaka's eyes. Following this, he clapped his hands for the inaugural time in his existence and prayed with utmost sincerity for the unfortunate souls who had perished. He then departed from the kingdom he had once considered his home. Meanwhile, Naradatta persisted in living like a wild beast in the forest, and Miguel and Tata each embarked on their distinct paths. Siddhartha commenced his quest to uncover the singular truth path, watched over by his mother from the celestial realm. Many years subsequently, on a moonless night, a band of brigand ambushed a corpulent merchant, and his enchantment. The frightened man scattered, while the gang as leader, revealed to be a fully grown Tata, scoffed at their cowardice. Just then, Tata as subordinates summoned him. Having unearthed the merchant as precious commodities, Miguel, who was also a member of his crew, proposed they transport the plunder to the adjacent village, where they were currently residing, as Kosala was on the verge of another assault on the kingdom of Shakya. Recalling Kosala as past action against his closest friend, Tata swore to exact retribution for their offenses. At that moment, he observed someone sighted on a road, discovering it was merely a man. Tata inquired if he was acquainted with the prince of the kingdom of Shakya, named Siddhartha, who had forsaken everything to become an ascetic. Tata remarked that Siddhartha was fully soon to abandon a life of opulence, a comment that irritated the monk. The monk clarified that ascetic practitioners do not inflict self-harm without purpose. Rather, they do so to accumulate spiritual merit for their subsequent existence. Upon hearing this, Tata simply scoffed at him, and Miguel quipped that she would be an ideal ascetic monk, given that her entire life had been an unbroken chain of hardship. Following this, she issued a challenge to the monk. She declared that if he genuinely believed his life's purpose was to endure suffering, then he should emulate his eyes, as she had done, to substantiate his conviction. Hearing this, the monk seized a torch, fell to his gaze, and without the slightest hesitation, thrust the flaming brand directly into his eye socket. The following day, a hunter observed that Siddhartha possessed hair that was excessively long for an ascetic, and offered him a razor, even extending an invitation to his home for grooming. Back at his dwelling, he presented Siddhartha with a fresh robe, stating that his ally has to open. Another monk with a scarlet eye soon arrives, requesting water. Siddhartha introduces himself, while the newcomer ponders if this is the fabled Shakya prince he had heard about, before identifying himself as Depa. Subsequently, the hunter reappeared, announcing that his eldest son, Asaj, also wishes to become a monk, and asks him to accept him as a pupil. Siddhartha explained he is not currently accepting any disciples, and Depa interjected, suggesting the family as primary motivation is likely to reduce the number of modesty Niktovi. As they depart, Depa notices Siddhartha observing him and clarifies that he intentionally burned his eye to demonstrate his unwavering commitment to his skeptics. He also mentions that his spiritual guide, Narada, had forsaken everything and adopted an animalistic existence to achieve a pure life devoid of desire. Depa expresses his conviction in asceticism, believing that the more he endures now, the more favorable his next life will be. Afterward, they decide to journey to the ascetic forest, and en route, they spot the ascetic trailing them through the torrential rain. At one point, after the ascetic cuts himself with a poisonous plant and nearly drowned, Siddhartha turns back and pulls him from the water. While crossing the river, Depa advises Siddhartha to abandon the child, convinced he wants to survive, but Siddhartha persists in carrying him. They continue all the way to the desert, where they encounter some Kosala soldiers, accompanied by their young prince, who had just finished hunting a deer. The soldiers approach the monks, and the young prince senses something unequal about Siddhartha's gaze, but then he quickly dismisses it. Assuming they are merely ordinary monks, once they leave, Depa explains that the young man is actually Vardaka, the prince of Kosala, born to the Kosala king, and a Shakya slave woman, because the Shakya king had deceived him by presenting the slave as a noble woman. Following this, the monks journey for several days, enduring scorching heat and navigating dense mountain woodlands, until on evening, Tata and his companions observe them from afar, and approach to inquire about Depa's condition. Depa responds with a silent gaze, but Siddhartha informs Tata that their young companion is in poor health, and urgently requires medical care. Upon receiving this information, Tata guides him to his encampment, where he prepares a herbal concoction for Asaji. Tata clarifies that medicine consists of a few herbs he possessed, and that, had he retained his ability, he would have collected additional ingredients by inhabiting Abir. Siddhartha expresses astonishment upon learning of Tata's past capacity for animal possession, and the pattern recollects his master. Naradatta, unsuspecting of a remarkable young boy, sharing the same name, who possessed the ability to inhabit animals, yet never physically matured. Tata clarifies that subsequent to losing his powers, he underwent a transforming infrastructure. Comprehension. Condition. Siddhartha requests Tata to retrieve a head bloody, intending to incase the inflamed leg and draw out the venom. Following the boy's treatment, Tata uses the knife to seal the incision, without raising it, and he suffers a seizure due to the intense agony. Immediately, his heart ceases to beat, and his consciousness drifts into an unfamiliar dimension where Siddhartha's mother materializes, and informs him that his time to die has not yet arrived, instructing him to accompany Siddhartha to through his travels until his demise. Meanwhile, back inside the tent, Siddhartha initiates chest compressions until his heartbeat resumes. At that precise moment, Magella enters the tent, charming Firwood, and inquires of Peter about the identities of the ghosts. Upon saying her, Siddhartha utters her name, and she immediately drops the kindling the moment she identifies his voice. As they both stand there, visibly shaken, her voice quivers as she questions his presence. Siddhartha expresses regret for failing to become the magnificent king she had envisioned, and in a fit of frustration, she rushes out of the tent. Concurrently, both Tata and Depa are astonished to realize that Siddhartha is the long-lost prince. Tata then confided that he has been seeking him out because Kosala troops were responsible for the murder of his mother and sister, explaining his profound animosity towards them. However, due to his lack of social standing, he requires a monarch's assistance to wage war. Having realized his pent-up fury, Tata implores Siddhartha to assume the throne and exact vengeance on his behalf. But Siddhartha instructs Tata to wait. Adicada while he dedicates himself to finding spiritual purpose as a monastic, and pledges to return to his realm should they fail to uncover the truth's sakes. The following morning, Asaji awakens abruptly from a terrifying dream, proclaiming an approaching tornado. The young boy rushes into the village to alert its inhabitants. Tata and the others express disbelief, yet Asaji persists in running through the community, shooting for an immediate evacuation. Unexpectedly, a tornado materializes from nowhere and advances towards the dwellings, mercilessly obliterating everything in its trajectory. Asaji rescues another boy and seeks refuge until the storm subsides. Once it passes, Siddhartha and the archers are astonished that a tornado genuinely manifested. Sometime later, in the nearby kingdom of Magadha, the monarch receives Asaji in his royal court. Asaji inquires of the king what had the series to learn, and when the king asks about his future, the boy simply status theater. Everyone present erupts in shots directed at the boy. However, the king quits the crowd and asks who will be his killer. Asaji, with childlike innocence, declares that his own son will assault him in 3 decades and will subsequently ensure divine retribution. Upon hearing this, the king smugly informs Asaji that he to receive a prophecy foretelling his death upon counting to 3. Nevertheless, the boy maintains his smile and dances about playfully. While the king counts to 3, Asaji summons a guard. As the third count is uttered, a snake descends from above. However, everyone is taken aback when the guard spear impales the serpent, leaving the boy unscathed. Witnessing this, the king comprehends that Asaji genuinely possesses foresight, and the boy asserts that his time to die has not yet arrived. Following this, he smiles and discusses that his death will occur in precisely 4 years, 4 months, and 4 die. The king then requests him to remain as his counsel. However, the boy declines, explaining that his destiny is to accompany Siddhartha until his own final day. The king expresses astonishment upon hearing this and inquires about Siddhartha's location. Asaji informs him that Siddhartha is presently in the Pandava mountain en route to the ascetic woodland. That evening, the king, accompanied by an army, ascends the mountain, where he discovers Depa meditating in an inverted position. The king questions if he is Siddhartha, but Depa directs him towards Siddhartha, who is currently meditating nearby. After acknowledging Siddhartha, the king prostrates himself and implores him to join his kingdom as an advisor, even proposing half of his realm in exchange. However, Siddhartha warns him that he will experience suffering if avarice consumes him, and if he craves beyond his necessities, which is precisely why Siddhartha embraced monastic life. Upon hearing this, the king becomes despondent, confiding that mortality is inescapable. Yet he was informed that his own offspring would end his life in 3 decades, fearing death. He presumes Siddhartha can rescue him from this destiny. But Siddhartha shakes his head in disagreement and clarifies that he is currently unable to alleviate his fear of death. Nevertheless, he expresses hope of discovering a release from that apprehension during his pilgrimage to the ascetic forest. His response appraises the king who then extends his good wishes. Subsequently, Asaji and the 2 monks embark and a journey lasting several days through unforgiving wildland, assisting others and engaging in daily meditation until they reach the hermit's forest. The moment Depa steps into the woodland, he becomes visibly enthusiastic, and as Asaji approaches a serene pond, he is utterly terrified when a man emerges, fixing him with an intense stare. Depa then clarifies that practices such as holding on as breath underwater, suspending oneself from a tree, self-burial, and solitary confinement within a cave represent the ultimate forms of ascetic discipline. Following this explanation, Siddhartha commences his rigorous training, meditating atop Torna at night, amidst wolves, and even during thunderstorms, in the hope that such hardship will culminate in enlightenment. Several months then elapsed. One day, Siddhartha inquired of Asaji who was carving marks into the tree. The boy, with a grin, clarified that there was chronicling each day of the year on an artery, anticipating his death by the temerage the fifth on. Siddhartha dismissed this as madness, questioning if Asaji felt no fear of death. The boy confessed his fear but added that it was beyond his influence. Upon hearing this, Siddhartha was struck and inquired how he managed to live each day without apprehension. The boy responded that his life as objective was his driving force. Similarly, Siddhartha's own aim was to achieve rebirth as a being superior to human and to rescue albinos. However, he pondered how he could possibly accomplish such universal salvation. Asaji offered a silent meal. Over the ensuing year, Siddhartha persisted in his rigorous ascetic practice. One day, while endured beneath scorching sun, he let out a scream, and Depa admonished him, asserting that suffering would guide him to liberation. When Siddhartha questioned the eccentric monk if he was instructing him to pray, Depa affirmed it is starting. Their ultimate goal was to shed their flawed human forms. Siddhartha was aghast at this revelation, informing the monk he had no desire to die, which infuriated the deranged ascetic. The mountain commanded him to continue his training until he collapsed lifeless. Subsequently, as his physique deteriorated, Siddhartha pondered whether such self-inflicted torment was genuinely the means to redeem humankind. On a certain day, Tata appeared, discovering Siddhartha on the brink of death, still interred beneath the sun. He extricated him, led him to a nearby river, and dosed him with water. Upon Siddhartha's awakening, Tata declared he couldn't bear to witness him prisoned due to such senseless training. Following this, he positioned him in the shade of a tree. He offered Siddhartha a piece of fruit, but Siddhartha declined, explaining he was observing a fast. Tata urged him to consume it regardless, just as Detta and the other ascetic monks made their appearance. The monks instructed Tata to cease disrupting Siddhartha's spiritual exercise and to depart. At that moment, Tata observed smoke emanating from his dwelling and rushed towards Eti, concerned for Miguela's safety. They discovered a group of emaciated monks wielding torches, denouncing Miguela as a traitor and setting the shack ablaze. Tata forcefully repelled them, then dashed inside, swiftly seizing Miguel and dragging her to safety. This occurred just moments before the complete destruction of the shackle. Later that evening, Siddhartha called upon Tata to inquire about his and Miguela's well-being. Tata informed him that she was gravely ill. She was unable to move or speak to him, despite their arduous journey towards Tuihin. Hearing this, Siddhartha was overcome with distress and entered the dwelling. Despite Miguela's pleas for him to keep his distance, upon witnessing her dear state, hackneyed, and offered prayers for her the following day, Depa instructed him to focus on his training, having observed that Siddhartha's thoughts were constantly preoccupied with her. Siddhartha confessed that he found her suffering unbearable to witness. Depa retorted that it was shameful for an adherent of asceticism to be intimidated by his own pain. Siddhartha countered that no other monk in the forest had experienced the agony that Miguela was currently enduring. Concurrently, Tata brought Miguela some sustenance, but she rejected it, urging him to abandon her. She believed there was no longer any hope for her, and said he would believe that on she departed. On hearing this, Tata embraced her, "How you discover as soon as her?" Siddhartha observed them silently from a distance. The following day, Asaji opened Siddhartha's meditation box, and Siddhartha questioned the boy if Miguela's salvation was truly impossible. However, Asaji informed him that he should rescue her in the identical manner he had been suffered when ill, by extracting the poison. The moment Siddhartha absorbed this information, he hurried to her that very night and began drawing out the poison. This had caused Tata to fear he might contract the illness himself, but Siddhartha persisted throughout the entire night, until every trace of it was removed. The following morning, he forwent his training and departed to check on Miguel. An action had enraged Depa back at the cave. Siddhartha discovered her completely recovered, while Miguela wept and Tata expressed his gratitude. Suddenly, Depa and the other monks materialized and declared they had tolerated none of Siddhartha's insubordination and ordered him to depart. However, Tata interjected, proclaiming that he would be the honest to live instead, and informed Siddhartha that he would no longer delay for Siddhartha to return and assume the throne for his vengeance, thus allowing Siddhartha to pursue his spiritual discipline undisturbed. He explained that his wrath had dissipated upon witnessing Miguela's recovery, and now comprehended that Siddhartha's ultimate objective held far greater significance. Miguela conveyed to Siddhartha her happiness at having fallen in love with him, even though it had cost her her aging, because he had restored both her physical being and her spirit. With that, the two departed, while Tata exhorted Siddhartha to become a revered monk, and to accept him as his inaugural disciple. That evening, at the frontier of the Shakya kingdom, soldiers were standing to witness scores of tanks obliterated in mere moment to be an elephant army, which trampled everything in their path, followed by successive waves of Kozala's infantry. The young prince commanded his elephant to smash into the main gate, simultaneously instructing his most formidable warrior, Yatale, to launch an assault. The colossal, hulk-like warrior utilized the elephants as launching platforms, propelling himself into the air before slamming his mace into the fortification, cleaving it completely open. His breach allowed the Kozalan army to switch in behind him, with Yatala spearheading the advance. Kozalan soldiers effortlessly felled enemy archers and ignited the guard tower, while the infantry and Yatala indiscriminately massacred an entire party. Witnessing the ensuing pandemonium, a corpulent nobleman rushed to the king, imploring him to escape, but the monarch declined to desert his subjects. Concurrently, Siddhartha as well assured her son, Rahula, that once his father had completed his sacred quest, he would undoubtedly return to rescue them. OCD, Yatala effortlessly pushed soldiers aside, instantly neutralizing Anyon Wodar to assault the prince. With a single, decisive strike, before accompanying him deeper into the fortress. Bedawa, the majority of the Shakyan force had been annihilated, and Virudhaka declared his triumph. Later that evening, within the ascetic forest, Asaji informed Siddhartha that he was destined to be the upcoming full moon. However, Siddhartha found his prediction difficult to accept, given the boy as seemingly robust healthy. Asaji foretold that the world be devoured by wolves, but Siddhartha pledged to safeguard him regardless of the circumstances. Subsequently, as Siddhartha engaged in meditation, Asaji tumbled from a cliff while attempting to pilfer eggs from Anas. Siddhartha frantically descended, only to discover that the boy had miraculously survived by landing in a thicket of bushes. Shortly thereafter, the boy almost drowned in a river, causing Siddhartha another moment of panic, but it proved to be a mere fire. In this manner, the night of the full moon eventually arrived, and Siddhartha pondered if the boy would indeed perish as foretold, even after I had secured him to a tree. As Siddhartha meditated, a rabbi crept up and gawed at the ropes, and by the time he became aware, the boy had already vanished, by scoured the area for Asaji. While the rabbit guided the boy through some undergrowth, after which he tumbled down an incline, landing directly before a pack of famished wolves. Gazing at the starving pupa, Asaji smiled, petted them, and declared that he would soon satiate their hunger. He then lay down before them, intending for their parents to arrive and make a meal of him. Immediately afterward, Siddhartha chalks up, tumbling down the same slope. However, witnessing the wolf stare into his small companion left him utterly horrified. In a state of sheer panic, he sprinted back as swiftly as his emaciated legs would permit, collapsing face first into the grass. There, he succumbed to tears, weeping uncontrollably. At that precise moment, the para discovered him and recommended Siddhartha as training with unprecedented savagery. This included, at one point, setting him ablaze. Observing that Siddhartha still clung to life, the deranged monk bound him to a tree, allowing vultures to prey upon him. However, his fellow monks were so distressed by this sight that they hunted him, declaring he had endured sufficient torment. Siddhartha, nonetheless, refused to cast, even after 10 days without water. This unwavering resolve led the path to conclude that Siddhartha had attained the zenith of ascetic practice. Following this, Siddhartha commenced meditating on a cliff face beneath the scorching sun. He persisted through a tempestuous night, mentally repeating his desire to merge with his environment. Eventually, powerful gusts propelled his frail form into a cascading waterfall. Experiencing no sensation, he questioned if he has achieved unity with nature and reached the pinnacle of aestheticism described. Yet, as his eyelids drooped, Doge perceives himself adrift in an unfamiliar dimension, where his mother as voice revealed that Asaji's existence served to impart a crucial lesson. Tis true that all life participates in a continuous decline initially fills him with hopelessness. However, she insists that he must continue his journey. Upon awakening, he discovers a bowl of soup directly before him, moving him to tell his initial thought is that Asaji provided it, but it was actually a compassionate woman. Hailing from a neighboring village, she saved his life. After expressing his gratitude, he enters the wood, and every animal trails behind him. He gathers them, imparting the principle that nature dictates one life must be sacrificed for another as sustenance. This mirrors Asaji's fight with the wolves, Yet, only humans differ each other due to average, which he identifies as the genuine source of anguish. Concurrently, in the Kosala realm, the Shakya monarch fights judgment, asserting that further aggression is unnecessary. Nevertheless, the Kosala prince vows eternal unforgiveness for the Shakya populace and declares Siddhartha will pursue by his own hand Manuel. In the forest, Siddhartha prepares to depart, but Depa intervenes. Depa inquires if he truly intends to abandon the forest. Upon Siddhartha's affirmation, the man pledges to extract his self-inflicted suffering, thereby validating asceticism as the ultimate path. Siddhartha, however, contentedly has come to understand the futility of extreme ideology, causing instead to pursue a balanced existence, following a moderate course. This path lies between hardship and indulgence. Acknowledging Siddhartha as independent choice, Depa continues. At the Kosala frontier, the Shakyan populace is compelled into servitude. They toil until exhaustion or face daily execution, fueling the prince as perverse animosity. Simultaneously, the captive king hears his people as cries from within his confinement. One day, the prince's father becomes enraged, demanding an explanation for why his own mother was incarcerated alongside the Shakyan slaves. The young man merely responds that she, though, is a fellow Shakyan slave. His father points out her maternal relation. But the prince counters that showing favoritism to family would establish a poor precedent. That evening, Yatala visits the prince's captive mother in her chamber, bringing her celebratory food. He inadvertently drops the container, tempers inside with his enormous head. He vows to fetch another. The queen cautions him against returning, cheating her location in the woman's life quarters. Yatal, however, grows increasingly incensed. He declares his intention to liberate her, asserting her royal status. But the woman restrains him, explaining it would only exacerbate her son's difficulties. Yatala then questions why the prince imprisoned her. She clarifies that she is culpable for misrepresenting her lineage upon marriage. Despite this, he still regards her as a remarkable woman. Regardless of her servitude, this recollection transports him to his Yota when a famine struck his village. His family, including his enslaved mother, was tragically trampled by an elephant. This was done to lessen the burden of feeding. He was left utterly alone. Hearing his story, the queen praises him as a good soul, but reiterates her warning against showing her kindness. Such compassion, she explained, would only make him a target. Yatal, however, remains convinced the prince will hate his words. Later, after delivering food to him, he speaks with the prince. In response, the prince orders him flogged while he is bound to the ground, angrily telling him to change his foolish behavior. Frustrated, Yatala demands to know why the prince imprisoned his own mother. The prince retorted that they had to punish him for her deception and for possessing filthy Shakya blood, following further insults from the prince. Yatala erupts in rage, shatters his restraint, and storms out of the fortress. Back in his chamber, the prince recalls the constant mockery he endured. They taunted him as the offspring of a filthy Shakyan slave, and this derision drove him to forsake Aab in his quest for authority. Abruptly, his contemplation is broken by a messenger announcing Siddhartha's discovery. Upon hearing this, he promptly mobilizes an army and sets out to apprehend him. Locating the monk, he commands his soldiers to encircle Siddhartha, accusing him of causing his family a suffering and vowing to exact his life as retribution. Having delivered his threat, the young man anticipates a response. However, Siddhartha remains composed, inviting him to take his life if he wishes. Witnessing Siddhartha's tranquility, the prince proclaims he will execute although Siddhartha holds there. Siddhartha calmly questions whether vengeance truly brings him joy, then suggests that his malevolent thought probably torments his sleep. This observation deeply affects the prince. Nevertheless, he prepares to strike with his sword to sever Siddhartha's head, but at that moment, A bolt of lightning descends from the heavens. The lightning causes him to drop the sword, which lands before Siddhartha. The monk retrieves it and approaches the prince. His gaze profoundly unsettling. This intense stare frightens away all the encircling soldiers. Siddhartha turns to test and says malevolent thoughts, inflict more torment than a physical torture, rendering the prince's existence truly pathetic. Upon hearing this, the prince seizes his sword and withdraws in shame. Later, in his room, Garachal Siddhartha S.A.S. and the ignominious defeat intensifies his animosity. Just there, a messenger delivers their tidings. A pestilence is ravaging the female slaves and threatens to reach the palace swiftly, prompting the messenger to press for a decision. The question is whether to incinerate them all. Observing the turmoil below and pondering briefly, the prince commands their immolation. Concurrently, beyond the prison walls, Yatala is nagging when he suddenly perceives a general uproar about a nearby blaze. He realizes it originates from the woman's section. He sprints towards him, shoving aside and what obstructing his path. He breaches the wall and frantically searches for the queen. Disregarding the escalating inferno, he locates her. The colossal figure then forces his way out, battling to the castle's main gate, where he demolishes a massive section of the wall. He then permanently departs the kingdom. Much later, in a distant forest, the queen is delighted by Yatal's rescue. However, Verdaka tracks Yatal and discovers them the weapon. Initially, Yatala is pleased that the prince came to aid his mother, but observing the familiar look of pity in her eyes ignites his fury in the prince, that he proclaims he was the one who ordered the fire. He then departed, instructing Yatala to dispose of the woman. Upon hearing this, Yatala renounces his revenge and labels the prince, Datas heartless. However, his mother urges the Gian to compose himself and forgive for her sake. Yatala, hearing this, becomes serene. He then carries her away. Following an arduous trek beneath the blazing sun, he allows her to rest beneath a rocky overhang, where she inquires why he assisted her. He joyfully responds that she evokes memories of his own mother, describing her as a kinswoman, just like his mother, and expresses his desire for her to become his new mother. This revelation brings her immense happiness. She requests to see his face, reassuring him she will not be afraid, as he is a good person. This astonishes Yatala. Throughout his life, he had been labeled a monster. He unfastens his mask and slowly rotates to reveal his benevolent countenance, and the queen informs him she will joyfully assume the role of his mother. Envisioning a joyful existence with his new maternal figure, Yatala is overcome with happiness and discards his mask. However, several days later, he returns with an armful of fluid to feign her unconscious. He drops everything, quickly understanding that she has died. He begins to weep uncontrollably, his anguish cries reverberating across the desolate landscape. Subsequently, he transports her lifeless form a considerable distance into the woods. Then, with tears freely flowing down his cheeks, he excavates a burial site and tenderly lays her to rest. That evening, he finds solace by sleeping beside her newly made grave. The following day, consumed by sorrow and despair, he begins to roam without purpose across various regions and urban centers, plagued by insomnia, mirroring the profound solitude now experienced by the prince. Eventually, one evening, overwhelmed by helplessness, he plunges from a towering waterfall. Yet, even this desperate act proves futile, as his formidable, monstrous physique miraculously endures the plummet. Wrecked with torment, he implores the deity of thunder to strike him dead and bring his anguish to a close, but his pleas go unanswered. He then proceeds to wade through the river until dusk, at which point he discerns an unexpected luminescence. Further within the dense woodland, he discovers Siddhartha engaged in tranquil, silent meditation. He approaches courteously, then falls to his gaze before the serene figure. He declares his desire for death. claiming to be the most sorrowful individual on earth. Siddhartha calmly inquires about the source of his unhappiness, prompting Yatala to elaborate. His biological parents perished, crushed by an elephant, and his adoptive mother was swiftly taken by the plague, almost as soon as he had found her. Upon hearing this, Siddhartha softly responds that it was, in fact, his parents who experienced true misfortune. However, Yatala disregards this observation and indignantly demands to know why the prince, who had forsaken his own mother, had never fetched retribution. Siddhartha listens patiently, then states that the prince endured the greatest suffering, for as a royal born to a slave mother, he was compelled to maintain an emotionless facade through his life and witness her helpless demise. Now, he is burdened with the guilt of countless deaths, including his own mother as on his conscience. Meanwhile, Prince Viratharka hastens to his mother's burial city, fending off a pack of hyena, before desperately exhuming her remains. With tears cascading down his face, he embraces her lifeless form, pleading with her to utter her ungrateful son's name on final team and grant him forgiveness. He explained that he had no alternative but to appear in Velin, as he was obligated to govern the kingdom without displaying any vulnerability. Returning to the forest, Siddhartha gently reiterates that there is no question that the prince is among the most ill-fated individuals in the realm. He further asserts that, as one who has personally experienced profound suffering, Yatala ought to possess a greater capacity to comprehend the anguish of others than anyone else. Upon hearing all of this, the colossal figure experiences a simultaneous surge of sorrow and rage. He clutches his head and lets out a primal scream before violently striking it against the earth in sheer exasperation. Subsequently, Siddhartha tenderly rests his warm hand on the giant's shoulder and reveals that he, too, had lost his mother not long after his own birth. However, he clarifies, it was her act of giving him life that enabled him to encounter Yatala Nobe elucidate that every existence holds a purpose and an intricate connection between these. All sentient beings, were Yatala not to have existed, this equilibrium would have been disrupted, thereby underscoring his significance. He asserts that Yatala is fulfilling his inherent purpose and impacting numerous lives simply through his presence. The revelation that his life possesses such worth leaves Yatala utterly astonished. Siddhartha then reminds him of the many individuals he has rescued, citing the instance of his biological parent upon their initial encounter with him. Subsequently, he brought joy to Prince Virudhaka's mother, through his compassionate treatment of her, and ultimately to the prince himself, who can now find peace in the knowledge that his mother was shown kindness the another. With tears welling in his eyes, Yatala poses another question, inquiring if someone burdened with the blood of someone can truly be permitted to continue living. Siddhartha reassures ye that it is indeed permissible. This affirmation profoundly affects the giant, prompting him to declare Siddhartha a truly great individual and request to become his follower. However, Siddhartha modestly declines, clarifying that he himself remains a student undergoing instruction, and is currently in a period of grief, much like Yatala. Therefore, Yatala implores him to accept him as his inaugural disciple. Once his own spiritual journey is completed, vowing to wait for however long it may take, Heitan expresses gratitude for being shown the authentic essence of existence, and departed. In that instant, Siddhartha is taken aback by the profundity of his own words, pondering what exactly had inspired him in that particular moment. Just then, the sun begins, He's asking, and Siddhartha perceives the elderly man he had encountered in his yacht, now enveloped in the sun's radiance. The venerable figure informs him that he has achieved enlightenment, bestowing upon him the title of Buddha, signifying the awakened one. Heitan instructs him that his purpose is to disseminate his wisdom to humankind, for as long as life endures, and to guide people on how to live. At that precise moment, the spiritual dimension becomes perceptible to Siddhartha, An unrecognizable voice elucidates that human beings at birth resemble lotus flowers, blossoming with boundless potential. However, it is a lamentable tragedy that a multitude of these exquisite blossoms become so buried and lost within the mire. Consequently, it is his sacred obligation as the Buddha to assist this nascent flower in reaching their full bloom. Siddhartha wholeheartedly embraces the profound responsibility bestowed upon him. Shortly thereafter, Prince Virudhaka grants freedom to the Shakyan bondservant, while Tathagata Makil and the monastic order proceed with their daily existence. Meanwhile, Siddhartha embarks upon an extensive pilgrimage as the Buddha, dedicated to the salvation of humankind. However, this concludes the present video. Kindly remember to express your appreciation, liking this content, and subscribing to our channel. We extend our gratitude for your viewership, and we look forward to seeing you again in our next installment.